Hey, what's going on? It's early November 2025, and we're brewing a Belgian Golden Strong today, one of our favorite styles. We're not mimicking, but we're inspired by Duvel. It's, of course, a Golden Strong that's brewed in Belgium, one of the best ones, and we do our best to create our version of it. Should be a good time. I got our strike water hot. We brought it up to 180 degrees. That's kind of where we like to mash in. It lets us be around 152, somewhere in that area. We'll mash in for an hour, and we're gonna get the grains going in our water right now. We get them in incrementally. I think that's a word. So we can make sure we get any clumps broken up, and the right water temperature is required to extract the sugars that we need to create a nice beer. Just to follow up a little bit on what we're doing here, we're stirring in the grains. It's we went with a German Pilsner malt. As we were hoping to go with the Belgian Pilsner malt, but it was unavailable. But this is fine. We've got some German hops in there, at least for bittering. So anyway, like I said, we're breaking up the clumps. It kind of turns into basically a loose oatmeal. And you just want to make sure that you don't have anything that's clumpy or lumpy. You're just trying to extract sugars here, and you just need the water to be mixed into the grains thoroughly. And then we'll put the lid on it for an hour, and then we'll come back and be ready to brew. All right, so we've got the lid on and we're mashing in. We got right at 151, so that's good enough. All right, we're fully mashed in now, and we're getting ready to do a recirculation on our wort. Filter out the fines, add a little sparge water to it, bring it up to the correct volume, and get it transferred into the boil kettle, and then we'll turn the burners on and be brewing. You can see we got pumps and hoses, and we'll have a couple of more hoses hooked up here in just a little bit when we start transferring all this. But yep. All right, we are boiling now. It's going to be a 1 hour boil. We're going to add our first hop addition at 45 minutes, and then our final hop addition with 10 minutes to go. What I should say is 45 to go is when the first one goes in, and then 10 for the last one. So yeah, this is what we've got. Guess this might be called the kettle cam. I don't know, but we'll see you in a little bit. All right, we're getting ready to add our final hop addition. We've already done one with 45 minutes to go, but it's not that exciting, so we'll just show you the last one. And we've got about 10 minutes to go in the boil, and then we'll get it transferred to the fermenter. Got to cool it down first. There's a lot of ways to do that. We've got ours, but anyway, we won't pitch the yeast till in the morning or sometime tomorrow. So let me show you what we got here with the hop pellets, and we're going, like I said, put them in the, got a hop basket to kind of keep some of the plant matter out of the beer. It's just another way to keep it a little bit cleaner. Hop pellets going in the basket. This addition will provide, sorry about the close-up, aroma and also flavor. All right, we've got our brewed beer, Belgian Golden Strong, in the fermenter. Took a reading on the hydrometer to see where our original gravity is, and it's 1.060. It should probably dry out around to 1.004 or 6, which will probably give us about close to a 7% Belgian Golden Strong, which is a little bit on the low end for a Belgian Golden Strong, but there's nothing wrong with that. Let me show you what we got here on the hydrometer. It's a little hard to see, but anyway, 2 weeks in primary fermentation, then we'll transfer it to a secondary fermentation, and it'll spend 2 weeks there, and then we'll package it. We'll update you with gravity readings when they come in. Hey, what's going on? We're back at it now with our 2 beers that we've had fermenting. Our Belgian Golden Strong has been fermenting for 3 weeks, and the Belgian Saison for almost 2. These beers use different kinds of yeast. A typical ale yeast, I'm not sure if it's referred to as non-diastatic, but that's kind of a critical thing. I usually use a dry yeast for that, and I'm going to pull some of those packs out and show you what that looks like. But for a Saison, you use a diastatic yeast, which is STA1 positive. Not real sure exactly what the ins and outs of that are, but I'll show you what I used for my Saison. I don't have an extra pack of the yeast that I use for my Belgian Golden Strong, but we'll get into that here in just a minute. All right, I've got some of these dry yeast laid out on the table, and also some notes about diastatic yeast. Again, this dry yeast here is basically an ale yeast, so it is non-diastatic. Let me show you what we've got. All right, so I don't have BE 256, which is what I used for my Golden Strong. All these are made by, well, except for this one, are made by Safel. Lallemand is pretty good. That's their Belgian yeast. They do a lot of that, and they also do Saison yeast, but I cannot get it anymore in dry yeast. But this is, we'll give you some fruit, lots of fruit, kind of something you see in hazy IPAs. This would be like a standard pale ale yeast or IPA yeast, super clean. This is an English ale yeast. It leaves some residual sugars. It's very nice, and I use it in my barley wine, English dark mild, porters, and even stouts. And this one here is Safel's version of a Saison yeast, but it's fruity, mostly fruity, which is fine, but it doesn't give you that pepper spice that I really enjoy in a Saison. And this Safel BE 134 Saison yeast, it is non-diastatic, which is, I prefer to use a diastatic yeast. There can be some issues with that, especially if you have a cross-contamination between a standard ale yeast and a diastatic yeast, or non-diastatic and diastatic. That kind of comes down to sanitation and timing, and even more than sanitation. So let me read some notes here. All right, diastatic yeast is a type of yeast that secretes an enzyme called glucoamylase. It breaks down complex sugars in beer into simple sugars, which I don't know that that's outside of what other yeasts do, but there's something particular about this yeast. While this is a desirable trait for certain beer styles like dry saisons, it can cause problems like overcarbonation, unwanted off flavors, and even exploding bottles if it contaminates other beer where it's not intended. So what that's saying there is, again, coming back, I'm using the word dry a lot. This saison, our diastatic yeast, really eats your sugars and doesn't leave a lot left over. So if you've got an ale that's not super dry, like say a porter or a stout, some kind of English style beer that finishes somewhere between 1.010 and 1.020, and you get some of this diastatic yeast in it after packaging, it's going to eat those sugars. And I was saying, I kind of got cut off there with the GoPro literally cutting me off. You can be overcarbonated and have an exploding bottle. So this is kind of particular to the style, similar to like maybe a champagne, how it's dry, wines are dry. I don't believe there's a diastatic component to those yeasts, but I'm not certain. So anyway, diastatic yeast has a unique genetic trait that allows it to secrete the glucoamylase enzyme outside of the cell. I don't want to go on and on about this. Yeah, I think I've kind of covered the bases there. You know, with, they call it contamination if diastatic yeast gets into a beer that's using non-diastatic. It's not gonna, as long as you haven't packaged it, you can dry it out. You just need to, you have to be aware of it, and would be hard to do. So cross-contamination is an issue that has to be addressed every time. All right, so if you're thinking about home brewing or interested in home brewing, there's 4 books. It's a series called Water, Malt, Hops, and Yeast. It's the ultimate home brewer's book set. I would highly recommend that. I don't get off in the weeds on water at all. A lot of people do. You can nerd out on this to no end, and I don't do that. It's not necessary, but if that's what you're interested in and that excites you, then by all means pursue that. But never, even without, you know, nerding out, you're not nerding out by reading these books, because it's knowledge that you will need and will certainly help you. The malt and the hops and the yeast, they kind of take care of themselves, and so does the water. I mean, I just use public spring water. I've been using that for 11 years now. The problem with tap water is you've got some chlorine in there, which you're boiling, so some of that may come off. I'm not sure. I've just kind of stuck with the public spring water and been happy with that. So anyway, there's some resources. I'm going to show you some other things here. Sanitation. I think I may have talked about this before, but this is a sanitizer that I use. Oh yeah. Almost forgot. This is the yeast that I used for my saison. It's by White Labs. It's diastatic, of course, and they say Belgian strong ale yeast, which is kind of strange to me. That's not what I would use for like a triple or a dark strong or a quad. I would use this
I'd use this Abbey yeast. They have to use a couple of packs more than likely, but you have to find a yeast when you're brewing with high gravity beers or using it in high gravity beers. It has to be alcohol tolerant. Therefore, sometimes you have to pitch 2 packs unless it specifically says it's alcohol tolerant, which all that information will be on the company's website, what yeast to use where. Yeah, there's tons of resources. You know, with the internet, you're never going to be, it's too much information, really. So anyway, getting ready to mix up some sanitizer and then transfer out here using a siphon system. Like I said, you don't have to get complicated with this stuff. I've been using this basically food grade plastic for 11 years now, and as long as you are cleaning and sanitizing properly, you shouldn't have any issues. Okay, we've got our sanitizer mixed up. The directions are on the package for that. And this is basically our siphoning system here. This is the siphon, or part of it at least. This is the other part. We just take some of our sanitizer, shoot it in there to give it some, I don't know, it's not lubrication, but it allows it to slide in because it's a tight fitting. It's got like a rubber grommet there, so if you don't get some moisture in there, you're kind of setting yourself up for potential problems. But then we'll basically just pump this. Let's see, I got a situation here, hold on. Just kind of pump this a little bit to work some sanitizer into it. Also get it on our outside. I've got sanitizer in the bucket here already, and like I said, we're doing 2 today. One's a Belgian Golden Strong using a non-diastatic yeast, so it will be first, and then we'll transfer our Saison. Both of these are going into secondary fermentation. They've already gone through primary. Most of the sugars are probably fermented. We're going to take a gravity reading on both of them. I'm sure the Golden Strong is finished because it's been in there about 3 weeks. Saison's only been in there about 12 days, but so we'll see what that looks like. We're going to leave them in primary or secondary fermentation for probably about 10 more days on the Golden Strong and 14, maybe 17 days on the Saison, depending on our gravity readings. And we do use climate control. I should probably talk about that a little bit. In fact, I will. I've got it's a heat wrap. I started on the Belgian Golden Strong for a week. I did primary fermentation at 68, which I usually prefer 66, but the BE 256, I wanted to try it a couple of degrees higher for a couple of days, so I started at 66 and then went up to 70 degrees to start day 3, or basically at the end of day 2. That takes, you know, a while to warm up, so starting in day 3 it was at 70. Same thing for the Saison. This time I started at 68 and then bumped it up to 70 at the end of day 2 going into day 3. So we'll take some gravity readings and see what we've got. All right, again, temperature control is pretty critical. You don't want a beer to ferment. I don't personally, especially a clean ale. I don't even want it to get to 72, 73, but definitely not up into the upper 70s and 80s. Some yeast are okay for that. Wheat beers are okay for that. But the wheat beer, the warmer you ferment, the more banana you get, which is, to me, is okay in a subtle banana. I'm not opposed to, but and this is just personal. I don't like a lot of banana in beer. So let me show you this. Yeah, so I've had my little heat blanket on here, which I'm going to show you with the Saison. It's been on there, but I basically put it in a room that's about 68 degrees. You know, at night temperature falls, in the day the temperature goes up. So I just wrap it with a towel, put some bungees on it to try to manage that, mitigate that a little bit, so I'm not having these fluctuations. Typically, I'm gonna douse this siphon pretty much all the way to the top in the pipe, because the siphon's going in the beer, which is pretty finished at this point. It's probably reached FG or final gravity, but still, especially doing it outside, you want to manage any kind of microbes or wild yeast. Wild yeast will certainly, I don't know if it's technically viewed as diastatic, but it will definitely dry beer out, so we're going to manage that. All right, so we're transferring now. Our fermentation bucket was sanitized thoroughly, and this is basically our siphon system that has been inserted into the beer. You can see around the rim that, I guess it's, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that's from yeast. So it goes through a process of high krausen, which is like peak fermentation, so you end up with that little bit of residue, which is yeast based for the most part. When this clears out here, we'll show you the leftover yeast. A lot of it's dead yeast, the proteins and other matter that settles to the bottom. You know, we discussed our Whirlflock tablets and how we settle the proteins out, and you can see it's a little cloudy right now, which for a Belgian Golden Strong is not, it's not unusual. I'm not sure if that comes from the yeast or exactly why, but I get that every time, and then eventually it clears up. So yeah, we're like I said, going to take a gravity reading after we get it transferred, see where we're at, and update you with that, and show you what the yeast looks like in the bottom. And we're going to crop some of these yeast. You can, obviously it has to be in a sanitized environment, but we'll show you that process as well. All right, here's our trub that's left in the bottom. See that kind of lots of dead yeast and some matter, and all of it's not dead yeast, so that's why we're going to crop some of it and put it in this jar, BE256, and then we'll put it in the refrigerator. And you can use yeast for several generations. With dry yeast, it's so cheap, it's not necessarily something that you have to do, but we're going to do it today anyway. Now with the Saison yeast being a liquid yeast, it's like 3 times as expensive. So we're definitely going to crop that and hang on to it. But I've got a hydrometer out here. You can see this is dry, 1.004. That's the FG, the final gravity. That's got to be done. We started at 1.060, so that's probably going to be, yeah, about what I was thinking, about a 7.5% beer. We'll run the numbers on that in just a minute. After we crop this yeast, we'll show you what the yeast looks like once we get it in the jar, so you can see it a little better, and also give you the final, the ABV on this Belgian Golden Strong that we're going to let sit at a little bit cooler temperatures for yeah, at least 10 days to kind of settle out again and clean up, really really nice before we pack it. All right, so we've got our yeast in our sanitized jar, and we'll crack the lid on it just a little bit in case it continues to ferment. It probably won't because it's pretty well done. But if this was to not be done and the lid be tight, it could swell and potentially explode. So you always have to keep that kind of thing in mind. So we came in at 7.3% ABV on our Belgian Golden Strong, which is, it's good. Nothing wrong with that. Next up is going to be our Saison. We got to do a little bit of prep work before we get that going. It's going to be the same process, but we're going to take a reading and kind of get an idea of where it's at as well. All right, we're sanitizing our bucket, secondary fermentation bucket for the Saison. Wanted to show you this heat strip that I use. I think it's, I don't know, it might be $70–$75 online. This is it, this little thing here. It's got a controller. Let's just secure it with electrical tape. This plugs in here, and then this plugs into the wall. Then you set your temperature. You have to hold this down and then adjust up or down on this side, and then set. And that way you have some control over your temperatures, which you'd rather it be a little bit cooler, in my opinion, because it's easier to warm it up obviously than it is to cool it down. And I say obviously again, but it kind of is. I have a refrigerator that I ferment in a lot of times, but this time of year, it's the day after Thanksgiving, it's a lot cooler. So like the basement is around 66 degrees. So I'll just probably put both of these in the basement, or at least the Golden Strong in the basement for the next 10 to 12 days. Probably wrap this one and put it upstairs. Really depends on the gravity reading. If it's finished, I'll put it downstairs as well and just let this settle out and really clean up nicely. And this is the maturation process where it matures. Once it goes in the bottle or the package, I mean, some people keg. I think I mentioned before that I do not do that. I do not force carbonate anything. I use the old world style of bottle conditioned ales, kind of the more natural process. It's just what I prefer to do. And I leave it in the bottle for 12 weeks. So I let it mature for 12 weeks before we start enjoying them. So we'll get a gravity reading once we get this transferred, and we'll see where we're at. All right, after just said what I said, I noticed that the airlock here is I still got some fermentation going on. It'll bubble from time to time, and I counted it to about 50. So about every minute this thing's still working. So we are not going to transfer now. We're gonna let it go. Wow, we're gonna let it go probably another 5 or 6 days, maybe even till next, probably a week. We're probably going to give it another week in primary, which will be almost 3 weeks. That's a little bit surprising, but as I said before, it's science, but it's not exact science, and you just kind of work with what your beer's giving you, and that way you get the best results. So we'll get back on this. All right, I'm in the mechanical room here, and kind of a basement. So I've realized that this will tell you the room temperature. So the room temperature is 59 degrees. And yes, I've got this jacket on it, or the heat wrap, but I think I'm probably going to put a towel around that to to bring that temperature up and have it a little more stability. So also while we're here, here's the fermentation refrigerator, which as you see there's nothing in there, but here's yeast that I've cropped. That's the 256 I just got, Belgian quad, or maybe that's the barley wine. Sour, that's a whole nother animal, farmhouse ale. And this is a habanero tincture that I made for a pineapple mango sour. Hey, what's going on? It's been a couple weeks since I transferred my Belgian Golden Strong to secondary. That's plenty of time for sure. Probably, I think it was in the fermenter for 3 weeks, which normally I leave it for 2, but just was pressed for time in other areas, and so I had to delay that a little bit. But anyway, we're going to package my Belgian Golden Strong today. I bottle condition everything, which means I put into bottles, not in kegs. I do not force carbonate. I think I've talked about this a little bit before. I do it kind of the old world way, where you add some dextrose, which is basically a type of sugar, to some water. You calculate. You basically take your gallons and figure out kind of what you want as far as carbonation goes. Like an English ale, I would probably put 1 ounce per gallon, but with a Belgian ale, I'm going all the way up to 1.5 ounces, which I've recently started increasing my carbonation levels in my Belgian ales. I mean, a regular beer might be 1.2 or somewhere in that range. If you're going to start doing this, that's something you can play with. So, dissolved oxygen, and basically oxygen post fermentation, that is something that you do not want. It's said that it will make your beer taste like wet cardboard. I don't know who tasted wet cardboard to come up with this and exactly how that happened, but it wasn't me. So one advantage that you have with bottle condition and or package condition, like you can condition in a keg as well, is when you add this dextrose to this water, you don't need a lot of water. I think I'm using a quart for this 5-gallon batch. Starts at 5, and then when the yeast and the trub and everything settles out, you typically end up with about 4.5 gallons, which is what I'm going to be packaging today. I normally do 12 22-ounce beers and 24 12-ounce beers, and I can typically get there with 4.5 gallons and a quart of water with dextrose in it. You have to boil that water, put the dextrose in, dissolve it, boil it for sanitation purposes. After you add the dextrose, let it cool. So there's a little bit of a process there, but anyway, the bottle conditioning, you have basically a miniature fermentation in the bottle, and when a fermentation happens, it eats oxygen. So that will eliminate any dissolved oxygen that could make your beer taste like wet cardboard. Oxygen post-fermentation is not only fine, but it's good. Most places will inject oxygen into a beer as it goes into the fermenter before they pitch their yeast. I'm basically, I think you saw the process where I was coming out of the boil kettle into a little strainer, which basically is going to oxygenate the beer to some extent, and you're going to have some oxygen in your fermenter because it's just an open air plastic bucket with the way I'm doing it. So anyway, that's something to think about. And one important thing also is don't rush this. A lot of people like to turn a beer around in 2 weeks, and you can do that. I've never done that. I pretty much take a minimum of 4 weeks. And I also kind of take what the beer gives me as far as fermentation goes. You know, when I transferred to secondary, I took that reading on this Golden Strong. and it was pretty dry, which was what I wanted. It may have come down a little bit more in the last 2 weeks, but again, don't rush. I mean, this is 5 weeks from brewing before I package it, and I have found that beer doesn't really hit its sweet spot until about 12 weeks post packaging. And that's a lot of time, but it's worth it, especially if you're doing Belgian ales or really any kind of beer. I found that's good, but Belgian ales really like time. So anyway, we're going to package it. I'll kind of show you what that looks like afterwards, and maybe when I get everything set up, I'll take a quick shot of that. It's nothing, it's very, very simple, very basic stuff. So we'll take a look at that here shortly. All right, I've got my sanitizer mixed up. It's basically the same process that I used when I was transferring from primary to secondary. This is the bottling bucket. This was the secondary fermentation vessel. There's a siphon, a tubing, sanitizer in there, sanitizer in there. This is what I use. There's other options. Here's my bottling bucket, and here's a little valve that I will put this on, and this has a little teat on it that you push into the bottle. It allows beer to flow in, and then when you remove the bottle, it stops. Bottling bucket, sanitizer in there. That's what I use. There's other options. This is a secondary fermentation bucket that I'm going to transfer from here to the bottling bucket here shortly. Here's all my bottles in sanitizer. Basically just dump them to try to fill them up, and then finish it off with this, just kind of pouring into the bottle. As I've said, sanitation is critical for this. I don't think there's anything I'm missing, but I'll probably show you a little bit more of what this looks like once I get the, it's not really a siphon. I'm not sure what you call the little piece that you slide the bottle on, but I'll show you that once I get it hooked up. All right, I've transferred into the bottling bucket, and I assumed that this was done 3 weeks ago when it came in at 1.004, but there is plenty of yeast in the bottom of this bucket, so I'm going to have to take another reading and see how dry we got. Again, unexpected. But while we're here, here's the bottle capper. This just kind of got them in sanitizer. I normally put this in, the sugar water in prior to transferring, but I forgot. So I'll gently pour that in, then stir it, agitate it a little bit. Oxygen. Yes, some oxygen, but we're bottle conditioning, so we're not worried about that too much. All right, just to show you something here on this hydrometer. I don't know if this is going to be in focus or not. Probably not. Anyway, you'll see beer is on there in 1.000. That's like, if you got to 1.000, that is a completely dry beer, which is not typical for most ales. The Saison may be close to there. This Golden Strong may be close to there. Yeast forward beers will be drier, which is something that I love. To each his own. Everybody likes things a little bit differently, but like I said, I'm going to have to take another gravity reading because this Golden Strong clearly did not finish in 3 weeks. So we're going to pull that and see what we've got. All right, so it's still a little bit cloudy just because you pull some yeast off the bottom. during transfer, but this will settle out real nice and be super clear. So we're just going to put this in our hydrometer and see what we come up with. All right, so we really didn't have much of a change, and part of that could be I messed one of the processes up. Instead of putting the sugar water in, or instead of taking a reading prior to putting the sugar water in, I took a reading afterwards. So I basically added fermentable sugars, but it's not really that big of a deal. I know it probably dried out a little bit more, but we're still somewhere around probably 7.5%. So that's fine, but that's again comes back to processes and what they call standard operating procedures. Helps eliminate mistakes, especially when it comes to sanitation. Obviously the whole process is important. Again, it's not rocket science, but process. All right, so I've got all this set up now. You can buy these kits that come complete with a fermentation bucket, bottling bucket, I think the siphon. I think it comes with everything. Anyway, you would just search for a beer making kit. And if you think you need something different, obviously the internet will tell you everything you need to know. So we're just going to demonstrate one of the bottles being filled. We're pouring sanitizer out of the bottle. We're a little obsessive about this probably, but it's kept us from having contaminations. You'll see a little bit of foam with this. That's common to Star Sand. Their expression is "don't fear the foam." I guess it's food grade acid, or I'm not sure, but I know it's definitely food grade. So you'll see it coming out of the top, and when you get it right at the top, pull it off, set it on the counter, put a cap, and I'll need 2 hands to activate the sealer here, but it's again, it's not rocket science. So that's kind of got us on our way to packaging the Golden Strong. We'll probably sample it at about 8 weeks, but really I've found 12 weeks is kind of the sweet spot, like I said. And after this, we're going to transfer our Saison to secondary for, I don't know, probably a couple of weeks. It's been in fermentation for 3. This Golden Strong had 5 total, which it continued to work a little bit. So we're gonna make sure we'll probably let it set for 2 more weeks. Probably 1 week at 70, about 70 degrees, 68 to 70 degrees, and then we'll put it in the mechanical room where that's about 60 degrees for a week to kind of settle everything out prior to bottling. One other thing with bottle conditioned ales, keg conditioned, anything that's conditioned in the package, you'll have residual yeast because you're going to have a mini fermentation. So it's like what I like to call silt in the bottom. It's just yeast, dead yeast. It's not a problem. It won't affect the flavor, but it will affect the clarity. So when you pour a bottle conditioned ale, you want to leave 1/3 of an inch in the bottom. You kind of have to pay attention to how you pour it, but that's almost part of, or at least in my mind, it's part of the, what's the word I'm looking for? All right, been trying to figure out the right word and really can't, but it's not a class thing necessarily, but it's what I would consider high end. Yes, a bottle conditioned ale, that's the word. Took me a little bit too long. It's high end in my opinion. It's old world, it's new world, it's top notch. So the quality of the beer that you get from that is second to none. Now that doesn't mean that there's lots of people that make second to none beer, super high quality beer through the New World way, meaning forced carbonation. So
What I'm doing is not the only way, it's just the way I prefer, but it will leave silt in your glass if you don't pour it properly, which is not a big deal. It's something that 1 or 2 times and you've got it figured out. So we'll keep this rolling and update you when the Saison goes to when we go to bottle the Saison. It'll be the same process, just with a different beer. We'll take a gravity reading and let you know what's going on. One other thing when you're packaging to make this easier is I bring the stool that I use to transfer. You know, whatever you're transferring out of has to be taller than whatever you're transferring into. So I use that stool and sit down while I'm bottling on the device here. Keeps you from having to stoop or kneel, which is great because you're looking at, you know, 36, 40 bottles, whatever you end up with. It just makes it simpler. So here we are, we got this Belgian Golden Strong packaged, and we'll update you once we start enjoying it. Show you what it looks like, kind of give you some tasting notes, hopefully something to look forward to. Thanks for watching. See you next time.